Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brittnee. Happy Valentine's Day. Today I'm going to be testing out Andrey Dubovik's chocolate stamps. He's an amazing chocolatier. I have mentioned him on here before when I've done some stamp techniques, like when I used the piping tips to stamp out the Olympic rings, or a couple videos back when I tried to make my own silicone stamp, but my silicone was a little too squishy. Anyway, he has been creating all these festive stamps at each holiday. He had some come out at Halloween and Christmas and now Valentine's Day, and I've been wanting to try them. So this video is my excuse, and I bought some and they shipped from Spain and they just arrived. I love the presentation of the stamps in the packaging. They look so nice. The set comes in one box like this, and then the handle, which is sold separately, comes in a second box like this. And then the website didn't say what molds were compatible with the stamps, but they sell them, and I didn't want to risk it, so I bought 2 of their molds. Well, now that they're here, turns out that they are just Chocolate World 2022. And funny enough, I already have 2, so now I have 4. Anyway, I'm really excited to test these out, so let's get to it. But really quick, in case you aren't familiar with the technique and how the stamps work, basically I'll be spraying the mold with cocoa butter and then heating up the stamp, stamping it into the mold cavities, and then wiping away the melted cocoa butter to reveal the design. So really, it's like an inverse stamp. Instead of stamping something into the mold, you're stamping something away. And for supplies, along with the chocolate stamps and molds that I bought from Make Eat or Make At, I don't know how you say it, do you guys know? That's who he collaborates with for making these stamps. Anyway, along with those, I'll be using a sponge brush or 2 to wipe out the cocoa butter. For colors, I'm using this chef rubber from the Jewel collection called Pink Quartz. It's like a really, really dark pink. To me, it looks reddish pink. French Fuchsia from Pastry Chef's Boutique. This light pink, which is Princess Pink, but I mixed in some white with it, so it's lighter. And then Pink Flambe from Pastry Chef's Boutique. It's called Pink Flambe, but it's a lot darker. It's kind of purpley. I'll call it purpley pink. And just some white, which is Alabaster White by Chef Rubber. And then I will also be using an airbrush. Okay, for the first design, I wanted to blow the bright pink up to the edges of the mold, and the plan is to back these with light pink, but I realized keeping the cocoa butter centered and moving evenly up the mold is really hard with this technique where you drop cocoa butter in first and then just blow air into it. So against my will, I switched to the airbrush. The airbrush works so much better for this technique when the goal is to keep the cocoa butter centered. So anyway, I pull the trigger all the way to spray a bit of cocoa butter into the center of the mold. Then I back off on the trigger so that I'm only spraying air, and it blows the cocoa butter up to the edge of the mold. This creates a cool look where the color is thinner in the center with ripples up to the edge. Next, I spray half of my second mold with my purpley pink color. Here, I just do a couple coats so that I've got a nice solid color. Then I back the bright pink with the light pink. Then to finish off the molds, I spray a solid coating of the reddish pink color I doubt you guys can tell fully in the camera, but the red color is shimmery and it looks so cool in the light. It almost has an orangey pink shine to it. Okay, so here's what I can tell you about these chocolate stamps, having already experienced all of this and now recording this voiceover after the fact. Successfully using the stamps takes a lot of trial and error. I definitely have some tips for you to help you succeed, which I will share with you throughout the video, so just be patient. And if any of you end up getting some, I hope that my experience using these can make yours go a bit smoother than mine did. This technique has a lot of variables. How long you heat your stamp, which is basically how hot is the stamp getting, how long you hold the stamp into the mold, which is how much cocoa butter it's melting, and how thick your cocoa butter coating is to begin with. All of these things will affect what results you get. With this first mold, you've been watching me struggle to get consistent stamp images. I would do one stamp and the design would be over melted and basically wipe off into a blob, while the next one could be under melted and then the design isn't even fully visible. I was trying to be consistent with my process, as in heat the stamp equally and then hold it into the mold for the same amount of time, but that still didn't seem to work for me. After struggling to stamp half of my first mold, I decided that I didn't love that particular design combined with the stamps anyway, so I moved on to the next mold to see if I'd have more success. I was having a sneaking suspicion that my issue was that my cocoa butter was too thick. You'll see I had a bit more success with this mold. My cocoa butter was probably a little bit thinner than the first mold because I only had one solid color, so the design didn't come out as thick. The stamps definitely improved, but were still pretty inconsistent. The reason why having cocoa butter that's too thick will prevent the stamp technique from working is that the thicker the coating, the longer you have to hold your stamp down to get it to melt through to the mold. But you have to imagine that as it's melting down toward the mold, it's also melting outwards, which means the lines in the design are getting thicker. That can make certain lines in the stamp melt away too much and connect, which then basically blurs your whole design. You'll see this can happen very easily, especially with the lip pattern, because there is this larger surface of warm stamp with some pretty thin lines to add details in the lips. But if you hold the stamp too long, those thin detail lines can really easily melt and the lips just become blobs. So really, there's no getting around this. If your cocoa butter's too thick, the stamps will not work well. You can't compensate by getting the stamp hotter or holding it down longer, because either way, that just then melts more cocoa butter in the surrounding areas. For about 5 minutes, I thought I would try another way you can use the stamps, which is to stamp edible luster dust into the mold before adding on the cocoa butter. The lips worked great for this, but the heart was harder because it was hard to get it coated without getting luster in the center spot, which then would stamp down into the mold and leave a mark. I just decided to bail on this because I knew it would probably look good once I blacked it with cocoa butter, but I didn't want to spend the time on it because I was still a bit bothered with how my other bonbons came out. So I was determined to get the stamps to work somehow with cocoa butter. So I thought, okay, well, you can stamp luster dust into the mold. Let me try stamping cocoa butter. I've stamped cocoa butter before on a bonbon after it was molded, and it works okay. Because the surface of chocolate doesn't absorb anything, cocoa butter always stamps with a texture. Not like if you were to stamp ink on a piece of paper, you know, it would absorb the color. But stamping cocoa butter onto chocolate or onto a plastic mold, the rubber squishes it and then suctions it, so it has a bit of a texture, which, depending on what you're looking for, you might not mind. For some designs, I definitely don't mind that look, and as you can see here, this was working pretty well for me. I especially love how the design on the lips comes out, because that added texture almost makes the lips look more realistic to how they would look when you kiss something with lipstick on. To finish off this mold, I back the white stamp designs by spraying the glittery red straight down into the center of each cavity, then backed them with the purplish pink color. And I was feeling pretty good about these. I definitely was really excited to have succeeded in making some cute Valentine's designs and making the stamps work. But to be honest, I was still bothered. I couldn't get completely clean and consistent results with the heating and wiping technique. So I decided to spray half of a mold with the purpley pink color so that I could test my theory about cocoa butter thickness. I tried to do the thinnest coat possible, just to where the whole mold was covered with color. To do this, I kept my airflow high, but I turned down the paint flow to about medium. And here I show you the difference in cocoa butter thickness between my first purple mold and this one. See how much more light the second mold is letting through? That coat is a lot thinner. And now to quickly finish this last mold, I backed the red stamp designs with light pink. And just to make sure the red ones were opaque, I sprayed a thin layer on that side as well. And the moment of truth, I heat up my stamp as evenly as I can without burning my fingers. And look at that crisp rose stamp. Oh my goodness, my theory was correct. Thin cocoa butter is the key. And see now here, I got greedy and tried to stamp 2 cavities in a row. That is still something that doesn't work for me. The second one never melts through all the way. It's crazy though, because when I see Andrey's Instagram videos, he stamps like 4 in a row and they all look perfect. I don't get that. So here are my final tips for success. Super thin cocoa butter, as thin as you can get it while still getting the look and color that you want. Get the stamp as hot as you can so that you can just touch it to the mold and get out. The less time the stamp is in your mold, the cleaner your lines will end up. You want the cocoa butter to be thin enough that just touching the stamp to it will melt the design all the way through. That's the best way to get clean and consistent stamps. And the final test was these tricky lips. And look, they worked. I even got the detail lines. I was so happy. To finish off my last mold and my 2 original molds, I just spray them all with white to fill in the stamp designs. Here's a little bonus content on how to easily clean the stamps. I heated each one up to melt the cocoa butter, then use a straw cleaner with dish soap to get into all the little crevices and clean them up. I didn't have time to fill all these bonbons, so I just shelled them all with dark chocolate so I could pull them from the mold and take a look at the results. Here's the first mold, a real struggle. Got a tiny bit better on the second mold, but still really pretty inconsistent. Aha! Finally, something that looks good. Stamping the cocoa butter directly into the mold. And here we have beautiful results with our really thin coat of cocoa butter. Wow! That pink is bright. Mostly none of these images turned out, except 4 out of 5 of the little heart rings actually did. And this design goes well with where the hearts sit, I think. I also like the plain ones. I'll set aside the hearts because they made the cut into our final Valentine's collection. Actually, just for the thumbnail photo. Here's the second mold. Okay, I know this rose didn't technically turn out because the stamp didn't go all the way through, but doesn't this one look so cool? If you had nothing to compare it to, you'd probably think it was on purpose. These lips. Also, just another thing to remember is to wipe really well or you'll have wiping marks like this. Again, the thick coat makes that more difficult too because the melting creates more cocoa butter to wipe off. These hearts turned out okay, and so did this rose. This lip didn't come out totally clean, but I kind of like how it looks anyway. And these 3 hearts look really good. This is the 3rd mold with the stamped cocoa butter. If you don't mind the texture the stamping creates, then these came out really good. They have a different look, but I don't mind it. I think the lips look especially good. And if you like the look of these ones, honestly, the process is easier than the other method because you just simply sponge cocoa butter onto the stamp and stamp it in. You don't even have to clean the stamp in between. It's so easy, you just have to have a steady hand and not put too much cocoa butter on the stamp, and that's it. With the other method, you have to heat up the stamp, use the sponge to wipe, clean the stamp in between, and clean the sponge also. And here's our last mold. They look so much better than the first 2 molds, except that rose where I got greedy. I'm so proud of these lips. They are so hard to get right. Now, just for fun, I'm going to show you the stamped versus the melted designs side by side. Comment down below which you prefer for each design. For the lips, I vote stamped. I love that extra texture. For the rose, if it's totally clean, I like the melted ones, but they're so similar, I think it's pretty much a tie. I think the mini hearts for sure look better using the melting technique. Nice and clean. And the I love you is another tie, I think. They look so close to the same in my opinion, and I almost think it's easier to keep them clean by stamping the cocoa butter in. All right, here are all my favorites. Alright guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's Valentine's video and that you learned something new. I definitely learned a lot today. If you liked the video, please like the video down below and leave me a comment telling me which color combinations you liked the best, and in the end, what technique did you like to create the designs? Which ones did you think looked better, or do you think they both look about the same? If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, today's the day. If you'd like to see something else that's sweet, just click on one of these thumbnails. Thanks so much for watching today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.